MMAfighting.com, and we are here in Melbourne, Australia, and we have a very special guest with us today. It's Mr. Eugene Bareman, the head coach of City Kickboxing. He's going to lead 3 of his fighters into battle on Sunday morning, not Saturday night, which are usually. It's Israel Adesanya, Daniel Hooker, and Brad Riddle. But first of all, how are you? I haven't spoken to you in a long time.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling pretty great considering the event that's about to go on, but I'm feeling pretty relaxed and composed, to be honest.
It's interesting, right? Because you're not a man who enjoys all that much of the spotlight, but more and more the conversation is about City Kickboxing, is about you being one of the great coaches in the world at the moment. How do you find that? Is that a hard thing for you to negotiate?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, it doesn't sit well with me. People talking about me in that light. I don't know. I just have a yearning to just be a little bit anonymous and be myself. But one thing I also want to do is help my guys and promote my team, and it's balancing those two things. So sometimes I need to help my guys and promote my team, and if I can do that, and if it means coming in front of a camera, then you got to do what you got to do. Like at the end of the day, like I used to fight. I still do fight, actually. You've
never retired, right? That's what we always spoke about.
I'm definitely going to have a couple more. Like when the plane landed here in Melbourne, I felt we went to collect our bags, and I told those guys, I said, if any 3 of you want to pull out, I'll jump in.
Wow, that's incredible.
I felt that, those itchy knuckles, that feeling.
Just the energy of the week.
Yeah, just the energy of being in a fight week, which you feel as a fighter. So I was just joking with them. I said, mate, if any of you guys aren't into this, then I'll take your spot, like, straight away, and you can take my spot. Like, I will swap with you in a heartbeat.
It's incredible.
So, yeah.
It's interesting. We were only speaking before we turned the cameras on here about UFC 193, Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, and, really there was no real City Kickboxing guys on that card, and now you're the main and co-main. I feel like you guys are the most important thing about this whole card. Like, back then, were you ever resentful of the fact that they were trying to put a spotlight in this part of the world? You got this fantastic gym, and you're like, where's the love for me?
Yeah, resentful is the wrong word, but I was like sitting there, like knowing that we could take those spots, that we were on the verge, and we just needed a helping hand. We just needed a helping hand to get my guys to this position. So I knew we could, make an impact. And I wasn't resentful. I was just biding my time, if you like, just waiting patiently.
I can remember very early on when I first spoke to you and when I first spoke to Israel, both of you guys always said, like, we've been planning for years for these guys. We've been looking at these guys for many years. We're going to be ready for them as soon as we start climbing the ladder. Can you remember the first time you looked at Robert Whittaker as a potential opponent for Israel in the UFC? Was it a long time before he had signed with the promotion?
The exact time I probably can't recall, but I definitely sorry about that. But I definitely recall conversations talking about Robert before Israel was even in the UFC, and before that was even on our radar. We were talking about, man, imagine if Robert's able to hold on to that belt and we're able to get you to the UFC and climb you up.
This exact situation,
exact same situation. Yeah, well, we said it to each other. It's like, imagine if he's still the belt. Imagine what that'll mean for us to be fighting him in particular, obviously, because he's the first Australian/Kiwi kind of champ. We talked about that before any of this had come even close to fruition. So, yeah, when I think back then and I think to the position we're in now, it's like amazing. Yeah,
it is. It absolutely is. It's interesting when you look at the fact that Robert has been out for so long, and then you look at on Israel's end, he's been so active. I mean, is that an interesting dynamic? Like, I feel like, there's so many advantages to being active, and then there's also advantages to not being active, where you can kind of develop stuff. I know he's been injured, but do you think about that at all? Like the difference between the two situations coming into this in terms of activity?
100%. That's one of the big stories of this fight that not many people have alluded to. I believe in both. I believe in being an active competitor. I believe that brings tremendous advantages to you being a martial artist or a fighter. But I believe in the downtime as well. I believe that brings a different type of development that needs to be had as well. So, one of the big stories of this fight is Robert's had all this downtime where he hasn't been fighting. And that type of development, it gives you a chance to kind of step back a little bit without the pressure of fighting and develop new parts of your game, hone and refine parts of your game that you're already good at. Some of those things you can't do when you're fighting, when you're so busy and so active, like you're just from camp to camp to camp. You don't have that sort of development time. It's a lot different. So, like the story, one of the underlying themes of this fight is what is the better approach? Is it better to be a lot less active and work on your game without the pressure of a fight, or is it better just to keep racking up as many fights as you can and doing as many fight camps and just gaining that cage experience over and over and over again? So those two ideas are going to basically clash in the cage. It's very interesting to me to see which one of those ideas will be, will come to the fore.
It's, when I think about that Gastelum fight of the year, even Mark Goddard has said to me, the referee there, he said it's by far, like he had one fight that was the best fight he had ever refereed for maybe 10 years. It was an old school Dan Hardy fight from Cage Warriors in the early 2000s. And he said as soon as this happened, he's like, it just blew it out of the water. But are you conscious of it was a pretty, there's a lot of shots landed on both guys in that fight. I mean, are you happy with the distance from that fight? I believe it was April, right? Do you think are you happy enough with that distance from the fight for Israel going into this fight?
If I'd be honest, I would have probably preferred a little bit more time after a fight of that nature, if I'd be honest. I'm always err on the side of caution when it comes to head trauma and, damage from a fight you can get. But in saying that, I think that it's been enough time for him to make a full recovery from that fight. But like I said, if I erred on the side of caution, I would have liked to wait a bit longer. But, that's all a moot point now. Like, it is what it is. Like, we're here now. So Israel, like neurologically, Israel's 100% and good to go. Physically, mentally, we're in the right place. So the fight is upon us. It's like, there ain't no escaping it now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the time thing, because I can remember even earlier in his career, it felt like, he had so much momentum earlier on, and you were like, I wouldn't mind calming this whole thing down. Now he's the interim champion and he's fighting this huge card. I mean, was there times during this when he was climbing the ladder, when he was being put in these matchups against Anderson Silva, where you were like, here, let's pump the brakes a bit here? I know in hindsight it's worked out great, but I mean, at the time were you like, right, this is a bit too much too soon?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You're completely correct. I wanted to pump the brakes quite a few times, but
did he?
He was probably less reluctant too. Yeah. He was less reluctant too. Like he agreed with me. He agreed with me, but then when the fight came up, the name came up, the negotiation started, his mind changed quickly. Whereas I was a little bit more, we're always going to be offered this and that. They're always going to incentivize us to take fights, even though we don't want to. Like, this is going to keep happening. So when are we going to draw a line in the sand? But yeah, I don't know. Like, they keep putting these morsels out in front of Israel, and Israel's like, well, man, fighting my hero, Anderson Silva, I'm taking it. I'd take it on a week's notice. Fighting for the interim title, I'm taking it. I'm not going to say no. So it is what it is. Luckily, for the type of athlete he is, like he's able to be the active. We always refer back to that 1 year. He had 21 fights in a year. So
crazy.
If he does 3 or 4, like, it's not too big a workload that he can't handle.
Absolutely. It's like that Gastelum fight. I mean, I think he answered a lot of questions there, because a lot of people expected Gastelum to be able to run through him, take him down whenever he wanted. When people were thinking about what's the best course of action for Gastelum here, and they're kind of saying similar things about this fight. But the way he fights, I know it's he's striking, but it's incredibly hard to kind of pin him down, right? Like, is that what you guys work on? Like, him trying to obviously use his arsenal, his striking arsenal, while also staying at a distance where it's nearly impossible to take him down.
Yeah, I mean, some questions were answered, but our preference was not to have those questions answered.
Right.
Like, if you're getting hit and your heart gets tested a bit, you've been knocked down, you've been rocked a little bit, that's never our preference. It's because of the good work that Gastelum did that we were able to answer those questions, and that's the positive we can take out of that fight, is that he did go into deep waters a little bit, and there was some physical damage that went on there and some fatigue that went on there, and he was able to push through just through using his heart and determination. But in terms of the distance in that fight, like there's some, we made some errors in that fight, and the important thing is to look at that fight and figure out the errors that we made and identify them and then address them. And we don't think we'll make those mistakes again. We think we've fully addressed them, and now it's up to see. It's to see if was Robert's team smart enough to see to have a similar type game plan, or see what Gastelum was doing, and if they are smart enough to see that, then have we been smart enough to fix up that errors? So there's
it's like chess.
Yeah, there's a bit of a game of chess there, but that's like every fight. Like, it's never just the fighter. Ultimately, it's the teams. It's like what's behind the fighter that is also in the battle, so to speak.
Do you feel it's a similar matchup in some respects?
I think there's similarities, yeah, and I think there's some stuff that if we don't address some of the things that happened in the Gastelum fight, I think there's some stuff that Robert can take from that fight and take advantage of. So, yeah, like I said, I think we've done a pretty good job at figuring out, what went wrong there and how to fix it up. And we've also, obviously, we've put plans into place that if Robert decides to emulate certain things, that now we'll be in a position to take advantage of those things. So there's similarities between Robert and Calvin, but also, Robert, like Israel, I think Robert has a very unique style amongst that division as well. So there's things there that we've had to deal with that are a little bit unique. And then there's other things that we've dealt with 100 times, and we can just go into our kind of vault of things and just pull them out for this fight. So it's a bit of both.
You told me that you turned both Israel and Dan away from the gym the first couple of times they came to. Well, I think Dan was later on. You kind of said maybe go to the US to him, but certainly when Israel showed up the first time, I think you were kind of like, maybe you should shop around and have a look at these different gyms. When you think about that, is it crazy that we're here now in Melbourne with both of those guys at the top of the card?
Some people would see that as a kind of strange approach, but
it's crazy, yeah.
I'm not I don't try to be overly confident, but I was like quietly confident
that they come back.
That they'd come back. I believe in my gym and what I've managed to learn off so many great coaches, and I believe in the coaches that are at my gym, and I knew that those guys were smart enough to realize what I had at my gym and what other people had, and I was quietly confident that they would find their way back to the gym. If anything, it was probably just a little bit of a ego on my part. Like, are these guys smart enough to recognize that they shouldn't be walking away from this place? And if they are, then they deserve to be here.
Do you get guys that are upset because you don't kick them out of the gym the first day they show up because they want to be the next Israel Adesanya?
Yeah, nah. Trying to make money from a gym and stuff, that's not the best approach for sure. Yeah, definitely only a few people get turned away. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about Brad? Because I guess he's to international audience, this is his introduction, so to speak. And I heard you speaking about him recently, where you said he was quite a well-known fighter as a kickboxer, and he was just finding it hard to get the top dogs really to agree to fight him, right? Like, that was the situation. He wasn't bringing a lot of name value just based on probably geographically where he is. Can you just tell us a bit about him so we know what to look out for?
Yeah, so Brad is one of the best stand-up guys in the world. He's already established himself as one of the best stand-up guys in the world. But yeah, like you said, just suffered from that name recognition. So became later in his career, it became very hard for me to get in matches with the top guys, because it was a risk-reward thing. Like, they were risking a lot for not much reward. So that was part of catalyst for him switching to MMA, to an organization where it's, you know, like if people tell you to fight, you're expected to fight, so there's no one avoiding him. But I mean, for all the fans out there that want to know about this guy, like he has plenty of YouTube videos and highlights on video. You go and look at this guy, like.
Which one would you recommend?
You can look at all his fights. He's a guy that he brings a unique style, and it's that offensive counter fighting, and that is probably the single most hardest style of fighting to do. And what I mean by that, for people that don't know, that's like a guy that's coming forward and putting a lot of pressure on you and leading a lot, but also if you fire back at him while he's coming forward, he's able to counter you at the same time. Traditionally, a lot of counter fighters, they spend a lot of time going back and doing a lot of defense and waiting for you to throw. Brad like goes forward, puts pressure on you, and entices you and forces you to throw and then counters. One of the hardest styles, you know, like in boxing, like Lomachenko is a good example of that. Hardest styles to master, and Brad's became, you know, in my opinion, like he's become one of the best in the world at it. So you're going to see a very unique style when you watch him fight, and you're going to see a very explosive fighter, and a fighter that likes to leave no doubt in the judge's mind over who wins. So he's either always aiming to like win decisively or obviously win by stoppage. So
that sounds good. That sounds like it's going to appeal to a lot of fans.
I mean, you would have heard like Israel and that talk about this guy. We groomed this way the same way. We groomed Brad the same way we groomed Israel. Like when we get in the UFC, we don't want to just be a name. Like we want him to rise just as quickly as Israel does. Like he's able to compete with the top guys in the division like straight away. That was our goal. So we think he's in that place now.
It's interesting. Maybe you can explain this to me a bit better, because I remember when Robert Whittaker signed for the UFC, it was a Kiwi guy who was fighting out of Australia. But the way this fight is being billed is, it feels like to me anyway, from the outside looking in, that it's an Australian guy against a Kiwi in Adesanya. So Whittaker as the Australian guy and Adesanya as the Kiwi guy. Is that how it's seen around these parts?
I think that's a little bit how it's seen around these parts, but I think that has a lot to do with how the UFC has marketed it, right. With that intention. So that's a really strange. It's the strangest kind of dynamic there is, because you've got a actual Kiwi who's being marketed as an Australian, and you've got a Nigerian who's being marketed as a Kiwi, and like you can cut that cake so many different ways, but. And like in my mind, like New Zealand not going to miss out on this. Like you got two Kiwis. It's massive. You have two Kiwis fighting for the bout. Like
huge.
For me, that would have been a more positive way to market it. It maybe wouldn't have put it as many bums on the seat, but I mean that's the kind of like the positive way to market it. Like how big is that? It's like it would be like having the All Blacks versus the All Blacks in the Rugby World Cup. Like that's insane. Like to have two Kiwis fighting for the biggest prize in the sport in that division is amazing. Like so, that's the way it's being marketed. But for me, you got two Kiwis. Rob's a proud Kiwi, but he's also an Australian. I think where the line gets drawn is that Rob kind of moved away from his country of birth. And established himself in Australia. So a lot of the Kiwis are a little bit like,
they see Adesanya as the flag bearer now.
Yeah, and Israel moved to New Zealand and developed everything in New Zealand, and that's where his home is. Rob's home's over here. I think that's where people see a little bit of the division. But if you look at it deeply, we kind of got you could two Kiwis fighting for the title. Amazing.
It's just, you mentioned the Rugby World Cup. I feel like I should ask you about that, because is that taking some of the shine away from this? Because I know how huge rugby is in New Zealand, even back home in Ireland. Is it? Do you think the fact that that's going on, this huge competition where you guys are the best team in the world, does that kind of pull a bit of attention away from this in some respect?
I don't think it has.
That's great.
I think people have like yes, their attention's still on the Rugby World Cup, but they're taking like a drink stop. You know,
it's only the group stages.
Yeah. They're going to take exactly like it's not the final. Like they're taking a stop. It's like, okay, we're not going to watch Namibia play Russia or something.
Yes.
And they're going to put all their attention on this. Yeah. So I think there's just as much attention as there would be on this if there was a World Cup or not a World Cup. So I think it hasn't taken that much tension off the fight. I think this is massive in New Zealand.
Just one last question, Eugene, and it's about Israel, of course, and his star. It just seems to be growing and growing, and it's a time in the UFC where we're seeing new names being pushed to the forefront. It seems like UFC finally have recognized Diaz as this, a global commodity. Jorge Masvidal has just come out with 2 big knockouts, and he's being pushed to the forefront. Israel has said since the moment he came in here that he was going to be a big star, but I feel like he can be nearly to the level of a Rousey or McGregor or one of these people. Do you feel like that? Like a win here is going to push him into a new stratosphere in terms of his celebrity and his stock internationally?
Israel's, after he wins this fight, will be the biggest star in the UFC, biggest active star, because there's one man that's sitting out at the moment, but I also know that it's a goal of Israel's to be bigger than him. So step by step, he's ticking all his goals off. And yeah, after this, he'll be the biggest name in the UFC that's active at the moment. And then he can address the next goals of his after that.
Do you ever get worried that it's like too much? Sometimes we see people when they get this level of fame that it starts kind of encroaching on their training and stuff like that. Is there any way you can manage that, or that the gym is able to manage that? Not that he seems like it's gone to his head and it's taken over his life or anything like that, the fame element, but is there a way you guys deal with that? Because you seem to do it quite well, whatever you're doing.
No, that's a constant worry. It's a constant worry. What I'm interested to see, if I be brutally honest, is, will Israel stay as active as he's been after this fight? This fight kind of takes him to a new stratosphere, we fought 21 times in a year once, but we were getting, a few $1,000s a fight, so we had to.
Yeah. You're on the ascent.
It's a lot different when you got millions of dollars in your back pocket. Is that desire still there to fight? Like, you got into this sport to be the best in the world at it. And it's a little bit easier to drive yourself when you got a couple of grand in your pocket and you're living like fight to fight. But when you got millions of dollars in your pocket, do you want to be as active as you want? Do you want to be the best fighter in the world? Like, do you really want to be the best fighter in the world? Because now you can afford to do whatever you want in between your fights. Now you can go and fly around the world and hire whatever hotel rooms you want and do whatever you want. Yeah, so that's when you really find out the true person. I talk about it with a little bit of reference because I think it's like a great test. I think it's like one of the best tests
of his
character, of who he is, of what do you want? Like, what do you want to be? Like, has all this fame and money changed you? Like, are you gonna strive to be the best, or are we just gonna settle and be like, look, we've made millions, we can just fight once or twice a year now. Like, you've got enough money for, my family and our family after that, and family that you're like, what do you want to do? Like, I talk about it with a bit of reverence because I think it's a great test, but I also don't have the answer to that question as well. Like, I don't truly have the answer. We have to be put in that position for myself to find that answer, for Israel to find that answer with himself. So definitely something I think about all the time.
Thanks so much, Eugene. You're truly one of the great minds of the sport. I really believe that, and it's an absolute pleasure to finally meet you and talk to you in person. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.